Going to be a quick introduction to Google Apps Script, and in this lesson we are going to be looking at macros, because macros actually write Google Apps Script as you record the macro. We'll be making a recording of a macro, opening it up within the Google Apps Script editor, making some adjustments to the content of the macro that we created, duplicating the function of the macro, updating and setting our own properties to the font and to the background, and then adding that new function as a new macro within the macro drop-down menu, which we can then run and get the functionality that's contained within the code. Coming up in this lesson, you are going to need a Google account for this, so go ahead and log into your Google account. Go over to drive.google.com, and from there create a brand new spreadsheet. So select the new button from the drop-down menu under Google Sheets, select a brand new spreadsheet. So this is the spreadsheet that we're going to be using in order to write our apps script. So you can go ahead and give your spreadsheet a name. I'm going to call it tester1. And since we're going to be creating a bound script, which is one of the types of app scripts that you can create, and that means that the app script itself is going to be bound to the Google spreadsheet. You can also make standalone scripts, which we're going to be covering later on. Let's populate some data into the spreadsheet, and this is the data that we're going to be using in this exercise. So as an introduction to what Google Apps Script does, is it allows us to run some code behind the scenes within the Google suite of products. You might be familiar with macros. Macros within Google Sheets allows us to run certain actions in a preset order, make a recording of those actions, and then run them again within the code. If you go in the top menu under Extensions, select Macros, and then select to record a macro. This is also where you will be accessing your Google Apps Script editor, and that's just below the macros within the drop-down menu. So go ahead and click Record Macro, and right now it is recording the macro. Once we finish, then we can save that, and that's actually going to write some app script behind the scenes, and then we'll take a look at the content of that app script. So select some cells, turn them bold, select the color, and then hit Save. So give the macro a name and save the macro within your Google spreadsheet. So now you can select under the extensions and select the macro, and you should see the macro that you just created, which is called, in this case, make red. First time you run it, you're going to have to authorize the document to run the script within the macro using your Google account. Will pop up the permissions screen for the Google Apps script, and it will tell you what the application is and what permissions that application is requesting to use, and the Google account that you're going to be using in order to accept those permissions. So scroll to the bottom and hit Allow. That's going to authorize that script to run. So let's go and reset the color of the columns back to the default by selecting the color and hitting Reset. And then also I'm going to select bold and unbold the contents of the column. Under Extensions, Macros, select the macro that you created, which will make the content of the selected cells red. Let's take a look at the code behind the scenes that's making that happen. Under the Extensions tab at the top, select Apps Script, and this will open up the script editor for the Google Apps Script. And you should see that within the script editor, there's a function with the same name as you had given to the macro. And there is some code within the macro that gets run when we select this macro to run. So what's happened when we created the macro, Google Apps Script was written as we were making the recording of the macro. That the first action within the make red is selecting the active spreadsheet. Then it's selecting the range to activate, which was C1 to C4. So if we were to update this to B1 to B4, and then it's setting the current cell to the C4 range, which we can actually remove because that wasn't doing anything within the app script. It was added when I clicked the cell while it was recording. And we were activating the range. We're getting the active range list, which is all of the cells that we had selected within the active range. And then we're setting the font weight to bold. In addition, we're setting the font color to be red. So let's make an update on this and then hit save with the save project. Go back into the spreadsheet under extensions macro and select the make red macro once again. When it runs, it's selected the contents of column B and it's turned them green. And we get that once we've made the updates to the content within the Google Apps script, where we selected a different range than was initially set and created within the macro, and we activated a separate range, and then we selected that active range where we set the font color to be bold, or we set the font weight to be bold, and then set the font color to be green. So let's try that one more time to make an update to some of the code that we have within the AppScript editor. I'm going to remove out the set bold. This time we're only going to be setting the color, and we'll set the color to this color. You can also use named values for color, which is a lot easier to understand instead of the hex colors as to what color it's going to end up being. So taking a look at the code, we see that we get the active spreadsheet object as a variable named spreadsheet, and then we use that spreadsheet object. We get the range, which we activate, and that's done by selecting a range within the spreadsheet. Using the spreadsheet object, we get the active range list, and then we set the color to be blue. So what do you think is going to happen once we run the macro that we've got named make red? Let's go back into the spreadsheet and try it out. So under extensions, macros, select make red, and if you said that it was going to turn the first column blue, you're correct. It turned all of the content within the first color blue. So using the macros gives us an opportunity to better understand how to write Google Apps Script, because it does that automatically where it selects and adds in the correct methods in order to accomplish the task that we're visually doing within the spreadsheet. In the upcoming lessons, we're going to learn a whole lot more about Google Apps Script and some of the amazing things that it can do when you run various functions within your Google Sheet. Select the function, duplicate the function, get the active range, update this to select all of the cells from A1 to C4. So that's going to be selecting from A1 to C4, which is going to be the entire range of content. And then for that, font color to be purple, chain together function, and as we press the dot within Google Apps Script, you should see a pop-up window appear, and these are the methods that are currently available for this range that we've selected. That we wanted to use is the set background, and type in yellow into the background and end the statement with a semicolon, just as you would with JavaScript. Give this function a new name. I'm going to call it make purple. Save the content within the Google Apps Script. When we go back out to Sheets, under extensions macros, see that we've got any additional macros that we can currently run. Import macros by pressing import. We have the make purple function. So let's go ahead and we're going to add that function in as a macro. Close that macro screen. Open up the macro screen once again. You should see the new function that we created within the Google Apps Script. So select the make purple. So what it did is it selected the range that we had specified, turned all of the text purple, highlighted the background of the cells to be yellow. We can reset this back to what the original colors were using the menu options within the Google Sheet. Select under the macros, run the make purple again. Going to populate that running through the Google Apps Script code, updating those properties, setting the font color to purple and the background color to yellow. So now it's up to you. Go ahead, create your spreadsheet. You can add in some data into the spreadsheet, record a macro, open up the Google Apps Script, make some adjustments to the macro, create a brand new function, give it a name, and attach it as a macro within the Google spreadsheet and run the code and see what happens. And you can be ready to move on to the next lesson.